Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very special guest coming up to talk to us about a very special book. Now, many of you know Arielle Ford. She's a leading personality in the personal growth and contemporary spiritual movement. For the past 30 years, she's been living, teaching, and promoting consciousness. Recently, a beautiful piece of literary work was discovered that was written by Arielle's late sister and New York Times bestselling author, Debbie Ford. And this work is titled, Your Holiness, Discover the Light Within. So let's welcome to the show, Arielle.
Thank you so much. How are you?
Oh, fabulous. It's such an honor to have you here. And gosh, my heart was so touched when I saw that Debbie's new book come out.
Yes, it was a big surprise for all of us that there was going to be another book.
Well, and I would love for you to share with our listeners how that even came into being, because I know it's been, gosh, I mean, we all miss her. It's been about 5 years since Debbie's passed, and I know when that happened, a lot of us were feeling like, gosh, you know, there's a little bit of the light that kind of went out in the world when that happened.
Well, here's what happened. You know who James Van Praagh is, right?
Oh, yes.
The world's most famous medium, talks to dead people, and he's been a longtime friend of the family. And a little more than a year ago, he called and said, you know, I've just moved to San Diego, and I want you and your husband, Brian, and your mom to come see my new house. And when you do, I'll give you a reading with Debbie. So we said, of course, yes, because he doesn't do private readings anymore. You can't actually buy this kind of amazing thing. So we went up there. We saw his house, which is spectacular, and then we sat down for the reading. And Debbie came through instantly, and the first thing she said was, Arielle, you have to write a prayer book with me. And I was like, no way. I don't want to write my own books, let alone write your books. It's not going to happen. And she was really insistent. And then other dead relatives came through. Both of my dads came through and my husband's parents, and Debbie kept popping in and out. And then at one point, James said, she keeps talking to me about Minnie. Who is Minnie? And I just freaked out because nobody knows this, but Bo, Debbie's son, has a half-sister named Minnie. And Minnie isn't even her real name. That's her nickname. And you can't Google this information. So I explained to James who Minnie is, and he said, oh, okay, this makes sense. She's telling me she wants Bo to know that when he was with Minnie, she was there too. And what he couldn't have known was that Minnie lives in London, and she grew up in Scotland, and she hardly ever comes to San Diego. But the week before, she came to San Diego to see Bo. So I thought, okay, now he's just showing off, right? He's just so linked into Debbie. So the reading went on for about 90 minutes, and with Debbie popping in every 5 minutes saying, you have to write a prayer book with me, and I kept saying no. And finally, I realized that she was not going to give up. She wasn't going to leave us alone until I said yes. And so finally I said to James, I have no idea how I'm going to do this, and you're probably going to have to help me. But yes, Debbie, we will figure out a way to write this prayer book. So we're driving home, and my husband says to me, you know, I spent so much time with your sister. I took her to her doctor's appointments and to her chemo treatments and to this place and that place, and I remember her telling me that she had written some prayers. Why don't you call her office, and maybe they have copies of them, and that could be the start of the book. So I thought, oh, okay, that's a good idea. I get home, and I send her office a one-sentence email that says, do you by chance have copies of any of the prayers Debbie wrote? And they wrote me back, and they said, oh, we can do better than that. We've attached an entire manuscript that she's written. Now, at this point, I totally freaked out because I was her literary agent. You would think that if my sister wrote a prayer book, I would know about it. And I couldn't believe that attached to this email was a book. So I opened it up, and I read it in one sitting. It was 200 pages, fully edited, absolutely brilliant, gorgeous, stunning book. And I was completely baffled as to how in the world did this happen, and I didn't know about it. And when I thought about it, I realized, well, the last couple of years when she was so sick, we really didn't talk about books. We talked about her pain levels and experimental treatments and what she needed. So I picked up the phone and I called her editor at Harper One, and I said, "Hey, Gideon, hi, it's Arielle. How are you?" And before I could say anything else, he said, "Oh, Arielle, I'm so glad you called. For the last 4 years, I've been feeling so guilty. Your sister always wanted to write a prayer book, and I always talked her out of it, and I feel so bad." And I said, "Well, today's your redemption day. Open your inbox. I just sent you the book." So, of course, they bought it within days, and the book came out a few weeks ago, and it's called Your Holiness, Discover the Light Within, and it's really, out of the 10 books she wrote, I think the best thing she's ever done.
It must have been so touching as her sister to discover this manuscript that she had obviously poured her heart into, and then all of a sudden, you have your hands on.
Yes, and the book, is more than just a collection of prayers, because while it is filled with her original prayers and prayers by her favorite poets, including Rumi and Emmett Fox and some by Marianne Williamson, it is much more than that. It's a very prescriptive book on how she discovered prayer and how prayer saved her life when she was in a drug recovery treatment center, and how you can use prayer for every area of your life to improve in. Because I don't know about you, but almost everybody I know has either a hard addiction or a soft addiction or an addiction to suffering or an addiction to a story that's ruining their life. Addiction is something we all suffer from on one level or another. And what Debbie was able to discover is that when you have your attention on the divine, on God, on Goddess, and when you're praying, your attention is not on your problems or your suffering. So the book takes you through a really gentle process, as well as her own personal narrative, on how to connect to your highest divine self through prayer.
It's a beautiful book, and it was it's so well written. There are so many parts of it that I really appreciated and enjoyed, because it takes a person, if you know Debbie's background or you don't, it just takes a person through learning how to forgive and to have a better life.
Yeah, and one of the things we did before the book came out was I interviewed Debbie about the book through James. And one of the things she talked about was the importance of forgiveness and the importance of getting over judgment, that those were the two things that really would improve your quality of life on earth if you could just learn how to forgive and how not to be so judgmental. And when I did the interview, it was sort of an experiment. I didn't know how it was going to go, because in the past with readers, with channelers, you could ask a few questions here and there, but mostly they delivered information. And this was a true, Q&A interview. So it turned out so good that we are now giving away this half-hour interview as part of a bonus package for people who buy a copy of Your Holiness at her website, debbieford.com, and it also comes with all these other goodies like, audios of her meditations and even a chance to win a reading with James Van Praagh.
Well, it's a big thing. I know. I don't believe James is doing those kind of appointments anymore. I mean, he's just so busy, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. He's mostly, if you want to see him in action, you have to go to a public event where there's 3,000 people, and he starts picking people out of the audience. Well, he doesn't actually pick them. People from the other side start telling him stories, and then he has to find the appropriate family member in the audience. And I've seen him do this many times, and it's just unbelievable, the stuff that comes up and the information that comes out. And one of the things I like to say about Debbie's book, Your Holiness, is that if you didn't believe in the afterlife before, after you read this book, you will, because it becomes so clear that even though our loved ones on the other side no longer have a body, they're still very much who they were and who they are and who they're becoming. They just don't have the body.
Well, and it just, gosh, it must have just been such a heartfelt moment when you said, yes, I'll go ahead and do this, and it seems like just everything was...
It was terrifying, because all I could think about was, it's so hard to write a book that is your information. Imagine trying to write somebody else's book who you can't really talk to all the time. So fortunately, all I had to do was write the foreword to the book, which tells the story about how we found it, as opposed to, writing 200 pages on a topic I am not an expert on.
Yeah. Well, and so the book was all together. It sounds like everything went very quickly once you said, yes, I'll go ahead and do that.
Yeah, it takes a year to get a book out once it's finished and accepted, so it didn't go any faster than normal, although I tried to make it go faster. It just doesn't happen that way. But I'm really glad it's out now, because given the amount of craziness and insanity and density that's happening, I think this is a book that could really benefit just about anybody who considers themselves a spiritual person, because it really provides a lot of insight and inspiration and connection to our higher selves. Well,
and there's one portion of the book that kind of really stuck out to me, and there are many, but this one that just kind of comes to mind is the chapter where she talks about the dance between the inner and outer, and how she was going through this struggle with ego, decided to stop praying, and ego kind of took over. And it's interesting because it's such a characteristic that we all go through, that it's, I'm sure, so relatable to so many readers around the world.
Yeah, there's no question that ego is a problem. In fact, Debbie always said the ego stands for easing God out. So she talks a lot about the importance of being humble and remaining humble, and, really partnering with the divine so that you can create the life that you want.
In the discussions that you've had with your sister since the book has been released, through James, thank goodness for gifted people like him, my goodness, but since you've had those discussions, was there something specific that she hoped the reader would take away from this book?
Yeah, she's really hoping that people can heal and get whole and learn to love themselves for who they truly are, and get out of the ego to really, embrace the fact that, her basic teaching was about the dark side, the shadow. But what people don't often remember is that even though that appeared to be the basis of her teaching, it was as much about the dark side as the light side. Because a lot of people can admit that they have a dark side. They know that they're, angry or judgmental or whatever it is they're making themselves wrong for. But they have a hard time embracing the fact that they're also loving, caring, kind, compassionate, and embracing that part of themselves. So I believe that her greatest hope is that people will read this book and then find hope and healing in it. And the way that I suggest that people read it is that they first read it, front to back cover, and then use it as a daily teaching. Because what I do is I'll just, each day randomly open to a page and read a paragraph or two. And there's always a nugget of truth or enlightenment in there that will set the tone for the day.
It's so interesting when you do that. It seems like the book is really speaking to you personally. Spirit's really kind of calling on, different portions of the book at the times that we really need it.
Yes, and we sure could use it now, couldn't we?
Without a doubt, my goodness. Without a doubt.
Yeah, I thought I'd worked a lot on my shadow until the last 18 months of what's been going on in the world, and now I find that I am so judgmental of certain people in power and what they're doing and what they're undoing. And I'm having to really dig deep to embrace the part of myself that might be evil or wicked or not looking out for humanity.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, for many of us who think that we had a really good understanding of your sister Debbie, many people don't know, and you talked about this, about the addiction side. And how did that really kind of be a kind of like a instrument that she started to rely on prayer through?
Well, it all began when she was in her 4th treatment center for drugs. She was a very heavy drug user, and she checked herself in for the 4th time because she knew if she didn't that she was going to die because her drug abuse was so bad. And at one point on day 10 of being in that center, she wanted to leave. She wanted to go find drugs. And rather than go out the front door, she locked herself in a bathroom. And she describes it very vividly in the book that she got down on her hands and knees on this filthy, dirty bathroom floor, sobbing hysterically, and began to pray and just pray for the courage and strength to spend one more day in the recovery center. And after a time, she felt this sense of surrender come over her, and she knew that she could stay one more day. And that sort of started the habit for her, praying every day, praying for the strength to stay sober. And then once she got out of treatment and she was in a 12-step program, a couple of years later, she started going, she was already going to Narcotics Anonymous meetings on a really regular basis. But at the same time that was happening, this was in the very early 90s, I had just started working with Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer and Marianne Williamson. I was doing publicity for all of them. And I would send her cassette tapes of what I was learning from them. And there was one tape I sent her of Deepak's, and she called me after she listened to it because on the tape he was talking about, the possibility of truly healing and how even somebody with terminal cancer can totally heal, and within a certain amount of months, every cell in their body would be changed and they would truly be cancer-free. And she said to me, well, if that's true, which I believe that it is, then why can't an addict totally heal? She said, at this point, I've been sober 2 or 3 years, and every time I go to a meeting and I stand up and say, hi, my name's Debbie and I'm a drug addict, it's now feeling inauthentic. I want to be fully healed, and I want to get underneath the source of my addiction, the things that caused me to use drugs, so that I can feel confident that I'll stay sober. And that was the beginning of her path to studying the shadow through Carl Jung and getting a degree from JFK University in transpersonal psychology and synthesizing everything she was learning through all of her studies on psychology and addiction. So that was her inspiration, was first to heal herself and then to help others that feel. And the reason she never publicly talked about the addiction part and healing was that she never wanted somebody to use her story as an excuse to drop out of a 12-step program, because it would be so easy for somebody to say, well, Debbie Ford doesn't go to 12-step anymore. I've gone for X amount of years. I don't need it, because nobody did the level of work that Debbie did on this, and having been able to witness her life all those years, she really never faltered on going back to drugs. And in fact, part of that was really harmful to her, because in the late stages of cancer, when she was in a lot of pain, she would never take the amount of pain medications that her doctor recommended. And finally, I asked her one day, I said, why won't you do what the doctor says? You don't need to be in pain. And she said, I don't want to become an addict again. She said, what if I have a miraculous cure and I'm cured of the cancer, but I'm once again a drug addict? So it was an internal battle for her at the very end because she really believed that a miracle was possible, and she really never wanted to be an addict again.
It really must have been a very hard line to walk because you're dealing, obviously with, she was dealing with this illness, having cancer, and then also having to be very aware and conscious of her past addiction problem. And, a lot of people understand, we're going through like one of the biggest opioid epidemics, in modern history. And so I think when people hear this, of course they should still attend their 12-step programs and use every resource available to them. But my goodness, it just shows them that they can still walk that line and be authentic to themselves.
Yeah, it's a hard thing because when you are in pain, at least Debbie's doctor was recommending that she always stay ahead of it, which meant not taking the pills every time she felt pain, but taking them on a regular enough basis so that there was no breakthrough to the pain. And that was her struggle, and she just wouldn't do it. So next time I talk to her, I'll ask her about that because I've forgotten all about it. I think part of it was also her optimism that somehow a miracle would come, and also her denial that she was really dying.
Yeah. For anyone, I think that can be really difficult when we get to that point, and especially being a loved one to someone that's going through that, witnessing all that's got to be really tough too.
Yeah, I think at some point I probably should have taken some of her pain meds. I didn't think about it at the time, but it might have been helpful for me. Yeah, because watching end-stage cancer, there's really, it's horrible, absolutely horrible. Well, let's talk about something happier, Mary.
Yes. Well, I'm so sorry. I love the prayer section of this book. And I think that the prayers, and the reason we got down this path is because it's the call to prayer, like what brought her to the call to prayer. And I think it's so important that we kind of dive into that so that our listeners can have a better understanding of why prayer is important. And for me, it just it was a neon sign on keeping prayer as part of my personal practice.
Yeah, and one of the things I like to talk about is the different kinds of prayer, because as children we were really taught prayers of supplication. Dear God, do X, Y, Z for me. And what I've learned over the decades of studying all these different spiritual traditions is that the most effective prayer is a prayer of gratitude. My work is about helping people find love, keep love, and be love. And so I'm constantly around single women who are living in this state saying, I don't have anyone to love, I'm so lonely, there's no love in my life. And that type of belief and thinking actually repels love through you, or away from you, actually. So what I always encourage them to do is to sit down and make a list of all the people that they love, that they know also love them back, and then spend time saying prayers of gratitude every day for all the love you already have in your life. Because when you have your attention on how much love you already have, then you magnetize and attract to you even more love.
And what a beautiful place that is. And we've had you on the show before to talk about your book, Turn Your Mate into Your Soulmate, which I love. I think that's just a fabulous resource. So I can see why people come to you in regards to just love in general and how they can manifest that in their lives and bring more of that to them.
The world is just filled with love. Just like we all know in the Western world, we have enough air to breathe and enough clean water to drink, unless you're in Detroit or a couple of cities. For the most part, we know we have enough clean air, fresh water, and there's more than enough love for everybody. So when you're speaking or acting out of a love deficit, you're really just filling yourself up with a big fat lie, because there is no shortage of love. You know, my favorite line in A Course in Miracles says that the only thing that can be lacking in any situation is that which you are not giving. So if you're in a space where you really believe or feel that you don't have enough love, then the action to take is to be love. Who can you give love to? Who can you express love to? Who can you be grateful to? And, you know, part of that is expressing love for yourself and for your higher self and for the immense honor and experience we have to be on earth at this time, because I'm pretty sure most of your listeners are light workers who are here on purpose to help transition us into a better world. And hopefully it'll happen sooner than later, because I'm getting impatient.
I think we all are.
Is it over yet?
Yeah. I know, really. Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
Yeah.
I feel like that kid in the back of a car on a family vacation that's, you know, he's that long trip waiting to get there. You know, so, well, and it's interesting because even though your work and Debbie's work are so different, in a way there's some parallel messages that come through when we talk about the kind of love and judgment and just different things like that.
Yeah, and the thing is, her work in its true essence focuses on self-love, you know, and my work is really, you know, if you've got some piece of the self-love stuff handled, then I can show you the path to sharing your life with a beloved. But I don't really teach the self-love piece of it. And the thing that I do want to remind people of, especially the single people listening, is that you don't have to be fully, truly, madly in love with yourself to manifest soulmate love, because the truth of what a soulmate relationship is all about is to heal each other. And there's nothing more healing to your soul than seeing the love they have for you reflected in their eyes. So anybody out there who's sitting around waiting, thinking, well, when I lose 30 pounds or when this happens or when I get over that, then I'll be ready for love, most of you are stalling, okay? Because there's stuff that you never get over. You know, all of us who've been on the personal growth path know, no matter how many books we read or workshops we do or mantras we chant, our core issues will always be there. Now, what does improve is we find better ways to manage them. You know, we'll find better ways to integrate them into our life. But the truth is, you know, I've been working on poverty consciousness my entire life. I've gotten really good at improving on it. I would say I'm 80% healed over it. And yet there are days when I get triggered, and then I pull out my spiritual toolbox, and I'll do some EFT tapping, or I'll do a heart math lock-in, or, you know, I'll get out my retirement account and look at the bottom line and remind myself that these thoughts of being a bag lady are just thoughts. They're not truth. And I remind myself about what's so and what isn't. So, you know, anybody who's out there thinking, well, I have to be healed in order to have love, as the kids in Parkland would say, that's bullshit.
That is. They said that so well, you know, and that really.
Those kids give me so much hope. They're so bright. They're so articulate. They're so on purpose. They're so going to change the world. They're amazing.
We really needed a generation that could speak their voice like they are. I mean, they're doing such a phenomenal job. My goodness.
Oh.
So, well, and I know that you work with, you've got these different classes that people can be part of that will teach them how to find their soulmate, which, you know, it's interesting, you know, I've gone on my personal journey. You know, you work on self-love, and just, you know, some days you think you've got it down, yeah, like no problem. And other days, like how you were talking about, you're pulling out your toolbox and working on it. So I think it gives people a lot of hope that they don't have to have it 100% in order to be that, to be that partner that's deserving of great love.
Yes, and it's really an important message. I really want people to get that you are not perfect. You are never, ever going to be perfect, and that is perfectly okay. Stop striving for perfection. I just want to let your audience know that if they go to my website, it's soulmatesecret.com, I've got all kinds of freebies there. I've got a tab at the top that says free stuff. I've got free chapters to turn your mate into your soulmate. I've got a free video on how to manifest a soulmate by coloring. So if you just sign up for any of those, you'll get onto my newsletter list, and every Tuesday I send out a very inspiring newsletter on how to find love, keep love, or be love.
Well, I'm part of your community. I've enjoyed it over the years, so I highly suggest everyone do the same. Now, if they're looking to learn more about Debbie's new book, Your Holiness, Discover the Light Within, where can they go to find out more information about that?
It's so easy. It's DebbieFord.com, And I also wanted to let you know that her shadow process, her seminal work, weekend workshop, still exists. And at DebbieFord.com, there's information there. You can go to the Ford Institute, click on that, or look at events. And they do the shadow process several times every year. She still has people that she trained who are training coaches in shadow work. So her stuff lives on. And if they're unfamiliar with her work, besides reading Your Holiness, her book, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, is probably the next book to read, because it really explains what the shadow is, how to identify your shadows, and most importantly, how to find the gifts of your shadow.
I love that book. It's one of my favorites, too. And it's interesting because a lot of times when someone's new to this path, they're like, the gifts of the shadow, that doesn't even, how is that even a thing,
Yeah, well, I was doing an interview the other day, and they said, give us an example, and I'll give one to you right now, which was one of Debbie's favorites. So one of Debbie's big shadows was that she was a bitch, and she readily admitted that she was a bitch. And one day, when she was learning about the shadow, she started to think, well, there can't be any gift to being a bitch. Nobody wants to be around an angry, mean, difficult, bitchy woman. But she started thinking about it, and she started thinking about circumstances and situations in which she was being a bitch. And one of her favorite hobbies was to flip houses. She loved finding ugly houses, gutting them, remodeling them, and putting them up for sale. And she saw that when she was dealing with the contractors and the electricians and the carpenters and the landscapers, and they weren't doing their job or they were doing it wrong, that it really paid off to be a bitch, to really be able to go in there and express herself fully, because she was a perfectionist, especially when it came to design. And that was one of the gifts of being a bitch. But what she needed to do was to learn how to use it in the appropriate times, as opposed to letting it use her.
Yeah, instead of having that run the train. Well, it's interesting because when we look at ourselves, it's like, gosh, there have been some times I've had a few bad hair days, so I get it. But you don't want that being your existence all the time. So it's great to have a book like that can help people understand how to use the dark side of our light in different ways.
Yeah. No, it's incredible, transformative work. So anybody who's, really committed to the personal growth path, for sure read the book first, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, and then, if you're ready for an intensive, transformative 2.5-day workshop, then do the shadow process. But it's not for everybody, because it's hard work. It's very intense. But what I will tell you is that it's also a lot of fun. They do a lot of dancing in it, because it's not all about exploring the dark side. 50% of it's also exploring your light side, and it's totally amazing.
Well, Arielle, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today and to not only talk about all the amazing things that you're doing, which we're so proud that you're here sharing that with us, but also sharing Debbie's work as well. We so appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It was really great talking with you.
Well, thank you, Arielle. It's always such a pleasure to spend time with you and talk about your books. And, of course, today, your sister Debbie's book. Gosh, it just so touches my heart. I'm so glad we were able to spend that time together. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.